Hey everyone, we're here talking about Celtic spirituality. And so we'll start out talking about how the Celtic religion is really unclear because if you thought that Norse religion, we didn't know much about it, well, Celtic is even worse. Not much anything was written down until about the 700s, again by Christians. And the Celtic culture began as early as 3000 BCE. So it was eventually swallowed up. I mean, we're talking about the edges of the Roman Empire, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall. It was a completely different experience of Christianity when you combine that with these ancient pagan traditions. The religions of the tribes were localized, so each clan had its own series of gods. Very few of them kind of went across all of these different local tribes. Tried to kind of pick out some ones that were kind of common. So we'll see some of that. And let's see, we'll move on. One of the Some of the central beliefs of the Celtic belief system were a warrior hero with supernatural powers. Usually, this started out with warriors who fought these great battles, and then what happens is they the stories get told by the bards, and there's exaggeration, of course. And so instead of somebody winning a battle when they were, with their army that they were outnumbered 2 to 1, maybe. Now all of a sudden, that warrior hero that defeated the opposing army by himself, single-handedly. That kind of thing happens using supernatural power. Next is the sacredness of the earth. Earth is divine in Celtic understanding, and also the dominance of the earth mother, fertility goddess. Remember, fertility in these cultures where there is no um, where it's difficult to survive, um, doesn't simply mean having children, but it also means being able to have the land be fertile. And so the female goddesses, um, those that represent bearing life, are going to come to great prominence, and that happens here with Celtic spirituality. A couple gods that go across the Celtic world. First is Dagda. He's the father of all. He's this ugly, pot-bellied dwarf with a club that could kill 9 men at once and then revive them. He had a cauldron that could never be emptied, and this was again like the ultimate heaven to be able to have a cauldron that never went empty in a place where resources were difficult to come by. Another god that was popular across culture was Luch, the um, the god of the god of light. Right? He is the ideal warrior, harper, smith, poet, sorcerer. And you're kind of wondering, well, how can he be the god of all those things? And it's partly because in each of the different cultures, each of the different tribes maybe saw him differently, understood him to be the god of the smith the or he was a poet or a sorcerer or a warrior. And so they had, they understood him differently. And he's the only deity that kind of appears throughout the Celtic world. Gobnu, the smith and the brewer of beer, that's for you college students. And he made the weapons for the Tuatha, or the gods. So there's a couple of gods there. A couple more. You have in Britain, the children of Don filled the same role as the Tuatha. Their successors were called the children of Lear, and Bronn is one of those. He kind of in the top right corner here. The uh, he was a giant who walked across the Irish Sea to fight the Irish king. Ultimately, he sacrificed himself for his people. Again, this is a perfect example of exaggeration, where maybe he and his crew went on the boats and crossed over to Ireland and defeated them, and now all of a sudden he's a giant walking across the Irish Sea. Interesting, Artur is the god of the plow, and he's used as the basis for the King Arthur legend. And then Cúlainn is the Celtic hero who possesses supernatural powers while remaining human. and he later gets interpreted as Christ, contesting evil when the Christians come over and take over everything. One really super interesting thing about um, Celtic spirituality is the three Morigna. These are the goddesses and kind of a trinity. They're kind of the utmost importance, source of life and fertility. Danu, Macha, and Bridget. Now, this eventually, the Christians come in and hijack Bridget, and she becomes Saint Bridget. Danu is the mother goddess. Macha is kind of the war goddess, with horses and fertility and land. Bridget is the goddess of healers and poets and childbirth and inspiration. So those are the goddesses in this kind of trinity. Also, you have the kind of the fun stuff, the enchanted mythical fairies and leprechauns of Irish folklore that come forth from the Tuatha and believed to be the children of the goddess Danu. Um, and let's see, the Tuatha were the last race of gods to inhabit Ireland before they are defeated by the Celts and the Gaels, and um, and so they're the ancestors of the present day Irish. Um, in Scottish folklore, the fairies were divided into two camps: the Selly court and the Unselly court. Um, And while the fairies in the Sally court enjoyed kind of playing like harmless tricks on people, the unsally court often brought harm among the humans. They just liked to see the humans get hurt. The gods of the Celts lived in the other world, and you could have access to the other world through nature, the mounds and the land and the water. And so you could see lakes, hills, groves, and islands are kind of cult sites, and they retain their connection to the sacred long after the Celts disappeared. You can go to Ireland, and there's mounds, and people will say, "Oh, they're holy," and you say, "Well, why?" And you're like, "Well, we really don't know, but they're holy." Um, and the gods could come back, and they could visit the people, and on the new year, and this elements are passed on to Halloween, where um, we see that spirits come and visit the earth. Now, when Christians came, instead of this positive kind of the gods visiting and being helpful and connecting and loving, because these were false pagan gods, they were seen as evil and negative, and that's they're evil spirits like devils. And that's where Halloween gets the scary part. Celtic worship. I have a couple here. If you click through different Druid rituals, they're kind of fun. Some of these were pretty nasty, where they would decapitate and human sacrifices. Um, since Celts had no written history until Christianity, Druids, these kind of priests, kind of maintained the oral tradition. Mistletoe was part of Druid ritual. And lastly, I just want to talk about Wicca for a minute. It's kind of predominantly a Western movement. Um, it follows the practices of witchcraft and nature worship. They're fairly harmless. Some people get really nervous about them being satanic, and that's not the case at all. In Wicca, God is seen as kind of a masculine form, and the polar opposite, the female goddess. Many Wiccans believe in magic. They believe in practicing only white magic, which must be right intentioned and meant for goodness, kindness, luck, and love toward and with others. Wiccans refer to themselves as witches, and their spiritual focus is the rule of three. Whatever energy is put out into the world, whether positive or negative, will come back to you threefold. So that's a little bit of the cultic spirituality. There's not much we know about it, but it's some interesting stuff.